Good afternoon, and as promised, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different look at marketing, the other outline. Um, the two outlines are in two different places too, so as not to cause any confusion. The one exists within the main template for the business plan that's under templates here. We can take a look at that. The Word document business plan for a startup, I guess, is the title of it. The other one, then, if you come down to the marketing, you'll see where it says marketing plan outline. In some ways, I find, even though this one's more kind of a skeleton type of a document, it's got more detail, or maybe it's better to say that it I think has more things in it that you ought to include, and maybe it's a little more clear in what those things are and how they should be included in your marketing part. So keep that in mind, and this is it can be a bit of a mix and a match, right? Go through both. If there's one certainly that you prefer over the other, use that format. Using the one that's part of the template may fit a little bit more with the flow. But that said, there are some things that I think in here that you want to make sure that you include. And again, this may be a little bit more clear about how you should include those. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to expand it here a little bit so that you guys can see it maybe a little better. First is the executive summary. So we're going to have an executive summary for the plan as a whole, but this section's big enough that it maybe ought to have a little summary in it itself. So in the first couple of paragraphs, you ought to tell me, kind of like with any good paper, you ought to tell me what you're going to tell me, some of the main points that you're going to have within your marketing plan. Okay. I like this part, right? The challenge. What's the brief description of the product to be marketed and the goals, right? Okay. You're going to get into way more detail about these as we go into the marketing plan and the brief description of the product or service, to that should say product or service. You'll get into far more detail about that when we get into the business description, right? So somewhat in the marketing, and then even more so in some cases here in the business description. So again, this just needs to be brief, almost a part of the executive summary. So then you get into this though, right? What are your goals? You've kind of outlined some of those in your financials, right? Okay. So they can sure be quantitative, but your goals could be qualitative as well. Not all businesses are set up just to make money and make people rich. A lot of them are set up just to meet the goals of the individual that's running them. Maybe they just love working with dogs, and so they're going to do a dog hair clipping business or washing business or dog walking, whatever the case may be. It may be because that person has a passion for that particular job. Okay, and so those are the things that you ought to talk about here. Now, when we get into customer analysis, this is a part where I think I get let down a little too often. Who are your customers going to be? And a lot of people say, well, I'm going to appeal to everybody. It just doesn't work that way. There should be a primary market segment, because most companies have primary market segments. You might look at Costco, for example, and say that Costco is for everybody. Costco actually attracts people at the higher end of both the income and net worth brackets are their primary customers. That's not to say that other people don't shop there. They certainly do, but that's their primary market. Okay. You might say that Walmart is for everybody. It's a very broad. Okay, but still they probably have a primary market that's middle income, middle to lower income families that are looking for reasonable pricing and one-stop shopping, those types of things, right? Okay, so what's the number? What do I mean, right? How many people might be my customers? Well, given my particular geographic area, which you're going to define, right? How many people live within that area? You can find that. Okay, you can go to the Census Bureau for one that kind of, and I think they get their information from the Census Bureau, that might get you there a little quicker, is called ePodunk. ePodunk, yeah, all one word, epodunk.com. I think it's still there. I guess I didn't check before this semester for that. I apologize, but you might check. It's not going to give you the kind of detailed information that the Census Bureau can, but the Census Bureau breaks things down by how many people are within an age group, how many people, their gender, male versus female in each age group, race, income levels, those types of things. And so you should be able to drill down into a number for your primary group. Again, that doesn't say that you're not going to attract people outside of that primary group. You could have a secondary group as well. That would not be unusual. Okay, you may have a business that's maybe it's a video game shop. Yeah, you're not going to attract many people my age to a video game shop, right? You would attract a younger set. Okay, so think about those types of things and the type of customers that you would attract, right? The type. Okay, what are their interests? What are their goals? What are their behaviors? Those types of things. What are the value drivers? What are the things that are going to drive them maybe to your business? That kind of gets back to, is it going to be cost, price, I should say, or is it going to be the quality of what you're offering? Okay, what's going to go into that decision process? And are you offering those things, price, quality, convenience, those types of things, customer service, service after the sale, maybe some things like that, and concentration of the customer base for particular products. This one may not apply to a lot of you, but if you have a wide base of products, you might in fact then have certain segments of the population that are attracted to certain products. That's a possibility. I don't think that that's the case for most of you. So competitor analysis, should we do that? Yeah. Okay. Some of these things, again, they may not crossover. It may not be this clear in the other one, but these things, the customer analysis absolutely has to be in your final, right? The company analysis, yes. The competitor analysis, yeah. You need to list, if you're a coffee shop, how many other coffee shops compete with you? Okay, and one thing it doesn't say here, what about substitutes? Okay, so there's the coffee shop, there's the Grind, there's the one down on First Street. I'm trying to think of all the coffee shops that are here in town. There's IGA, right? They sell coffee through their McDonald's. Okay, so the Subway, they've got their own coffee that they sell through there, as does Taco John's even. But the substitute is people make their own at home, right? And that's become more convenient with K-Cups and all that other good stuff. So, okay, but what are the competitors? What's their market position, right? So are they the best? If we talked about pizza places, who do you think sells the most pizza? My guess, the most pizza sales might go to Domino's with their delivery and whatnot. The highest dollar amount, though, might go to Pizza Hut because they have indoor or inside dining plus delivery, and they sell beers and those types of things too. Okay, strengths and weaknesses of all those competitors. Okay, and so market share, frankly, you may not be able to find that kind of a number. We used to be able to find that in banking. But even when I was in banking, that was a hard number to find. So you may not find it. You may just have to make a reasonable guess. Again, it kind of goes up to, here's the leader, I think, in this area. Here's how, there's some businesses where there may be clear leaders, right, in the community, groceries, Gary and Leo's, right, or Walmart. I may not be able to distinguish between the two in terms of their grocery business. Collaborators, who's going to collaborate with you, right? Do you have suppliers? Okay, distributors, people that are going to distribute your product, retailers maybe those types of things. Will you have subsidiaries or joint ventures? I don't think there's any of you that are probably doing that, but you're going to have people that work with you, and so that's important to talk about those people people or businesses who will be collaborators on your business, because there could be some real important ones. If you're getting raw material, who's that coming from, right? The climate, yeah, and we're not talking about whether it's hot or cold, okay, but we're talking about the political and legal environment. Some of you have chosen businesses that do require licensing. I think, there's one of you that has chosen a business in the firearms industry. Guess what? We have a new president. Is there some risk involved with that? Absolutely. The political environment towards firearms is going to change drastically over the next couple of years. Will it affect that? Right now it's making demand go up like crazy. Okay, but could there be some interference by our political leaders? Yeah, maybe, right? So you need to discuss, you need to think about those things. For some of you, there may not be, that type of and that's okay to say that. I can't think of any political or legal interference that might come for this particular business, right? Economic environment, y'all need to talk about that. What's the economic environment of, right, our local area, maybe expanding to Montana, and maybe even expanding to the United States? We're coming out of a pandemic which caused a severe downturn in economic activity, but guess what? We're coming out of that. Okay, things are really looking up. Every one of your plans should talk about that to some extent. How about the local economic? If I'm talking about Havre, and some of you have chosen other places, some of your businesses may not depend on the local, right? It may be more widespread. It could be internet. It could be that you're going to travel around to sell your wares. That's fine. What's the economic environment in all those areas? Havre, you say, is pretty stable. What should I talk about? Well, what are the things that are important in Havre? Well, we got the railroad that comes through here. It's a major employer. Is that going to change a lot? Heck, that might improve now that, they canceled the Keystone Pipeline. We might get more oil trains that come through Havre. Okay, those are the types of things that you need to think through. Who are other major employers in Havre? Obviously the medical community here in Havre is a big employer, but the college. Okay, you'd be remiss if you didn't talk about the economic impact of the college in Havre. It's huge. Absolutely huge. It's vital to Havre's growth, or at least the maintenance of our economic. That said, Havre's not really a growing community either. Our population has stayed relatively stable for a long time. It hasn't really grown or shrunk, either one. Okay, so it's a stable economic environment, but only stable. Okay, what's the social and cultural environment, right? Oh, that's kind of interesting, and that could vary from town to town, right? Some, my wife's from Winifred. The social and cultural environment there is a little bit Western. You get your local news from the pub, okay, and things. I'm saying that only half jokingly, right? So think about the culture and the social environment where your business is going to be, where it's going to do business, maybe the customers that you're going to have too, and then the technological environment. How's that going to affect your business? Are there technological changes coming down the line? In the marketing sense, are you going to be able to use maybe some of the social, what do they call it? The Facebook and those types of things for your advertising, right? When you get into the marketing and promotion, you'll give more detail about that. But how is the technological environment going to affect your business, either very positively or maybe negatively too? It could have an impact on it, right? There could be competitors that can do things using technology that might be difficult. Here's one. We get to the SWOT analysis, and the important thing here, and I think the other outline has a little different method of doing this. And this is one of those cases where I don't care which you use. There's the one in the main outline. There's this one. One I like is one called Porter's Five Forces. I don't think I supplied that here. I might have a separate deal for it. But use one of these techniques to analyze your position versus the competitors, right? The competitors that you've identified. Okay. and it tells you what your, what your strengths are compared to them, what your weaknesses are. It's okay to look at your weaknesses and maybe how you're going to overcome those. What's the opportunities? It could be geographic areas, it could be demographic areas, it could be product development, different things like that could be your opportunities. And what are the threats to your business? Again, one of the threats could be this political and legal environment if you're in a firearms type of a business or something. Okay. So again, here we jump down into the market segmentation, and I probably already talked enough about this up here. In fact, you might be overlapping a little bit here, and so up here I probably got into too much detail. You might want to just hit it a little bit, because when you get down here to the market segmentation, you're going to talk about that segment, right? And who they are, how many of them there are, where they live, okay, geographically, demographically, their ages, their gender, their behaviors, what drives them, right? What percent of sales? Okay, so what percent of sales are they gonna bring you? Well, you may, and again, you may be able to find some industry data on this, and you certainly could probably, if you call Bear Paw development, you may, instead of trying to guess at what percentage of sales they might contribute, what you might want to do is look at your sales projection and say, if my company generates the sales that I'm predicting, that will represent, say, 11% of the total sales in our area. Okay. How do you do something like that? Well, I might be able to look up what shoe sales are, athletic shoe sales, running shoes. I kind of like running, right? So I might be able to look up how many running shoes get sold in the United States. Well, how's that affect mine if I'm doing a shoe store? Well, okay, if I break that down and I say, well, there's X billions of dollars in the United States, Havre and the geographic area around Havre is a set percentage of the population of the United States. So I can kind of apply that population, that percentage, and say, oh, well, if we're selling X billions of dollars in the United States, then in Havre there ought to be sales of, a few $100,000. Okay, and according to my projections, I need to do, 33% of that in order to meet what I've projected, whatever the case may be. So, think about that, and most of you ought to be able to do some math to get to that point, right? Okay, what do the customers want? These are pretty self-explanatory. How are they going to use your product or service? What kind of requirements are you going to have? Maybe support after the sale, those types of things, which can be a big part too of the the customer service or the differentiation. How do you reach them? What's the price sensitivity? Okay, if you opened up an ice cream shop to compete with Dairy Queen, right? Is there price sensitivity? Well, if your ice cream was way better than Dairy Queen's, and Dairy Queen's got some pretty good stuff, if it was way better, could you sell it for twice the price? Probably not. Okay. Could you sell it for, 10 cents more for a small Blizzard, or 25 cents more? Maybe. I don't know that people would be that price sensitive. Okay. So think those things through. This talks about alternative marketing strategies. Think about things that you might do to market it, all of them. This is a brainstorming session here, right? Think about the things that you might do, your different positioning. You might go for low cost instead of differentiation, those types of things. You can certainly discuss those, and you can discuss why you either accept those or reject those in terms of your own product or service, right? Then you get into your selected marketing strategy, right? Again, and this talks about the 4 Ps. I think that when it comes to marketing strategy, there's 2 main ones. Either you're going to be low price or low cost, or you're going to be a differentiator. The third one that gets mentioned sometimes, and that's fine, I don't have any problems with it, is a niche strategy. Usually the niche strategy is a type of differentiator. You're just going after a niche market or a certain real specific segment of a market, right? But, the 4 Ps probably ought to be included, not probably, very much should be included in your final marketing plan. And I think the 4 Ps are in the other one as well. Again, maybe not as clear as they show up here. So take a look at this one, and again, if you want to incorporate it into the other one and incorporate the clearness of this, feel free to do that, right? So what are you going to do, right? Are you going to have a brand name? What's the quality of your product or service? It keeps talking about product, and product's right in this case because it's part of the P's, but you substitute service for that too if that's what you're doing, right? What's the scope, meaning how big? It could be pricing. Blizzards are small, medium, large, or coffee small, medium, large, or frappuccinos or whatever it is, those types of things. Are you going to warranty that, and will you have packaging? Do you package services? You might. Services can be packaged. Think about bundling then when you talk about that. Could we bundle a service? If you're doing a doggy care place, well, you can come in for a wash, and that's $20. You can come in for a haircut, that's $20, but we'll do both of them for $30, right? You could have a bundle, something like that. Price includes that a little bit too. Okay. List price, discounts if you're going to have them, the bundling like I just talked about, payment terms, financing options. For some of you that may be in bigger types of industries where you might have some of those, take a look at your accounts receivable that you did on your financials, right? Leasing options, I don't know that any of you had any of those, right? How will your product be distributed? And again, this can include also your supply chain. How are you going to get the raw materials or the product? Maybe you're just a retailer and so you're going to bring in the product, right? But how are you going to get the raw materials all the way through to how are you going to get that to the consumer? What market channels will you use to do that? Okay. And what types of things will you do to motivate, if you're going to be a manufacturer and you're going to deliver it to retailers directly, what types of things will motivate that retailer? Maybe their profit margin, those types of things. Maybe the support, the marketing support you're going to give that retailer, okay, to market the product itself so that people show up at the retailer to buy it. Those types of things, right? Promotion. Then this gets into the oftentimes what people think marketing is only promotion, but obviously this is just a small part of our marketing. So how are we going to advertise? Here's where you really got to go back and look then and make sure that it's consistent with what you budgeted. And I get to this point a lot of times, and we're going to run a weekly newspaper ad, and we're going to have some spots on the radio, and we're going to have a billboard, and we're going to be on Facebook, and we're going to have our own website, and we're going to do several other things. And then I go back and I look at their marketing budget, and they got $50 a month budgeted for that. Okay. $50 wouldn't even cover a small ad once a month in a newspaper. So understanding the cost, most people have probably underestimated what their marketing budget's going to need, okay, based on when you get here and you start talking about how you're going to market your products. So don't be afraid to go back and make some changes there, okay? Do this and then go back and make those changes so that you really have a clear understanding of how you do want to market your product. You might have to look up some prices. A lot of that stuff like the Havre Daily News, Great Falls Tribune, the radio stations, TV stations even, you can probably find some of those ad prices or costs. You can probably find those right online, or oftentimes just a simple phone call. So then short and long-term projections, right? How's this going to fit? Okay, you've done a financial narrative and you've done the financials, and now you've written up your marketing thing. How is this going to drive your sales, right? Okay, and what are those sales going to be? And again, it could depend on different products, different services that you're offering, and those types of things. So this part here doesn't necessarily have to be long, but it should kind of address again how the marketing is going to affect or how it's going to drive those sales. Okay. Then in conclusion, again, because the marketing portion is so long, you can have a concluding paragraph that kind of summarizes everything. So as if you're writing a good paper, you're going to tell me what you're going to tell me, then you're going to tell me, and then you're going to tell me what you told me. So think about that when you put that in there. Sometimes you may have an appendix. Okay, when we get to the management and organizational part of this, you're going to have a huge appendix, and there could be some things in here. Could be a menu. You know, I've had students do that in the past. If they were doing a restaurant or a coffee shop or something, they'd make up a sample menu, and that might show up then as an exhibit. That's part of marketing, right? What's going to be our menu? What's it going to look like? What are our pricing going to be? Those types of things. Okay, so there may be some things that would be in your marketing plan that could become a part of the appendix. If that's the case, you know, go ahead and make those up, and then we'll include them. So that should do it. Okay, you probably won't hear much more from me about marketing. You got a week or two here to work on it, and put a lot of thought, put a lot of effort into it. This is as you can see, the the outlines themselves are fairly long. You start filling in those outlines and adding research and adding those types of things. This part of the project should be pretty lengthy. Okay, think in terms of many pages. You know, 15 to 30 probably wouldn't be out of the question. And if you go more than that, fine. Okay, just so you don't blather on. There we go. Thank you very much.